I didn't know my life was about to break apart the moment I walked into the Calvetti family estate that Sunday afternoon. I had been working as Dante Calvetti's personal assistant for 11 months. 11 months of managing his calendar, screening his calls, organizing his meetings, most of which I knew better than to ask questions about. I wasn't naive. I knew what kind of man he was, what kind of family he came from. But I needed the job. The pay was extraordinary, and my mother's medical bills weren't going to disappear on their own, so I kept my head down. I stayed professional. I told myself that as long as I didn't see anything, as long as I just did my work and went home, I'd be fine. That Sunday, though, I'd been summoned. Dante had called me himself rare, since he usually communicated through terse text messages, and asked if I could come to the estate to help him prepare documents for a meeting the following morning. His voice had been calm, almost gentle, and I'd said yes before I could think twice. The estate sat on the edge of the city, behind tall iron gates and rolling green lawns that felt like they belonged in another century. I'd been here once before, briefly, to drop off files, but this time, when I arrived, the guards waved me through without question, and a man in a dark suit escorted me not to Dante's office, but to a massive sitting room filled with afternoon light and the low hum of conversation. I froze in the doorway. There were at least 20 people inside. Women in elegant dresses, men in tailored suits, all holding champagne flutes and speaking in Italian and English. It looked like a celebration, and in the center of it all stood Dante. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him like it had been designed specifically to remind the world who held power in this room. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his jaw sharp, his expression unreadable. He was speaking to an older man, his posture relaxed but commanding. Then his eyes found mine. Something flickered across his face, surprise, maybe, or satisfaction. He excused himself and crossed the room in long, deliberate strides. "Mia," he said quietly, his deep voice sliding over my name in a way that made my stomach tighten. "You came. You asked me to," I stammered, glancing around nervously. "I thought you needed help with documents." His mouth curved ever so slightly. Not quite a smile. "I did, but there's been a change of plans." Before I could ask what he meant, a woman appeared at his side. She was stunning, younger than him, maybe mid-20s with long dark hair and sharp, curious eyes. She looked between us with open interest. "Dante," she said, her tone playful but pointed. "Is she just your employee?" The room seemed to quiet, or maybe it was just my heartbeat drowning everything else out. Dante's gaze never left mine. And then, slowly, he smiled. It wasn't the cold, controlled smile he gave in meetings. This one was different, warmer, possessive. "She's about to be family," he said. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stared at him, my breath catching. Around us, people began to murmur, some in approval, others in curiosity. The woman, his sister, I realized, laughed and kissed his cheek before turning to me with a knowing grin. "Welcome to the family, Mia," she said warmly, as though this made perfect sense. But it didn't. None of this made sense. I looked at Dante, panic rising in my chest. What is this?" He stepped closer, his hand settling lightly on my lower back. The touch burned through the thin fabric of my dress. His voice dropped, meant only for me. "I'll explain, but not here." His eyes held mine, steady and unyielding. "Trust me." I wanted to pull away. I wanted to demand answers, but there was something in his gaze, something that felt like both a warning and a promise. And I found myself nodding, even though my hands were trembling. He guided me through the crowd, past smiling faces and raised glasses, and into a quieter hallway. My heart hammered against my ribs. When we were alone, I finally found my voice. "Dante, what the hell was that?" My words came out sharper than I intended, but fear made me bold. "What did you just tell them?" He turned to face me fully, his expression serious now, all traces of that smile gone. "There's a situation," he said carefully, "and you're at the center of it." "What situation? I don't." "You've been seen with me too many times," he interrupted, his tone firm but not unkind. People are asking questions. Dangerous people. My blood went cold. What kind of people? The kind who see vulnerability and exploit it. His jaw tightened. The kind who would hurt you to get to me. I shook my head, taking a step back. Then fire me. Let me go. I'll disappear. It's too late for that. His voice was quiet, but there was steel beneath it. They already know who you are. They already see you as leverage. The weight of his words settled over me like a suffocating blanket. So what does that mean? I whispered. Dante's eyes searched mine, and for the first time since I'd met him, I saw something close to regret flicker across his face. It means the safest place for you right now, he said slowly, is at my side. Publicly. Undeniably. As what? He didn't answer right away. And in that silence, I understood. No, I breathed. No, you can't be serious. I am. You just told your entire family that I'm what? Your fiancé? My voice rose despite myself. I didn't agree to this. I know. His hand reached out, gently catching my wrist before I could turn away. His touch was firm but careful, as though he knew exactly how fragile I felt in that moment. But if I hadn't said it, if I hadn't claimed you first, someone else would have made you a target. And I won't let that happen. I stared at him, my mind racing, my pulse wild. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. But when I looked into his eyes, dark, unwavering, fierce, I knew he meant every word. I don't have a choice, do I? I whispered. Dante's thumb brushed over my wrist just once, a touch so gentle it sent a shiver through me. You always have a choice, Mia, he said quietly, but I'm asking you to choose this. Choose safety. Choose me. And God help me, I didn't know if I was terrified or something far more dangerous. I didn't sleep that night. After Dante's sister Isabella, I learned her name had pulled me aside to gush about how romantic it all was. After I'd been introduced to aunts and uncles and cousins who looked at me with varying degrees of suspicion and approval, after I'd stood beside Dante for 2 excruciating hours pretending I understood what was happening, I finally escaped, but not before he'd walked me to my car. You don't have to do this alone, he'd said, his voice low as we stood in the shadow of the estate. I'll have someone assigned to you. For protection. I don't want a bodyguard. I'd replied, my voice tight. It's not optional. I'd glared at him, but the look he gave me in return was so steady, so immovable, that I'd simply gotten in my car and driven home in silence. Now, lying in my bed as the city lights filtered through my window, I stared at the ceiling and tried to process everything. Dante Calvetti had just told his entire family, his entire world, that I was going to be his wife. And I hadn't said no. Why hadn't I said no? Because you're terrified, a voice whispered in my mind. Because you know he's right. Because the moment he said those words, something shifted, and there's no going back now. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. I reached for it, my heart skipping when I saw his name. Dante, are you all right? I stared at the screen. It was past midnight. He was checking on me. Me? I don't know. His reply came almost immediately. Dante, that's fair. But you're safe. That's what matters. I didn't know how to respond to that, so I didn't. I set the phone down and pulled the blanket tighter around myself, trying to ignore the strange, unsettling warmth his words left behind. The next morning, I arrived at his office like always, except everything felt different now. The receptionist smiled at me a little too warmly. The men in dark suits who usually ignored me now nodded in acknowledgement as I passed. And when I stepped into Dante's office, he looked up from his desk and something in his expression softened. Good morning, he said. Morning, I replied, setting my bag down carefully. My hands were still shaking. He noticed. Of course he did. Sit, he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. I'm fine standing. Mia. The way he said my name firm, almost gentle, made my knees weak. I sat. For a long moment he just looked at me, really looked at me, as though he were cataloging every flicker of emotion on my face. You didn't have to come in today, he said finally. I work for you. You're more than that now. I flinched at the reminder. I don't even know what that means. Dante leaned back in his chair, his dark eyes never leaving mine. It means you're under my protection. It means no one will touch you without going through me first. And it means, he paused, choosing his words carefully, that for the foreseeable future, you and I will need to be seen together. Often. My stomach twisted. Seen together, like a couple. His voice was steady, unapologetic. Yes. I pressed my hands together in my lap, trying to steady myself. And what happens when this is over? When the danger passes? He didn't answer right away. And when he did, his voice was quieter. We'll deal with that when the time comes. It wasn't reassuring. But it was honest. I need to know something, I said, forcing myself to meet his gaze. Did you plan this? Did you always intend for this to happen? Dante's jaw tightened. No. Then why? Because the alternative was worse. His voice turned hard, protective. Because the moment I realized they were watching you, I had two choices. Let you become a target or make you untouchable. And this makes me untouchable? Yes. He leaned forward, his elbows resting on the desk. In my world, Mia, the only thing more dangerous than being an enemy is being considered weak. But if you're mine, if you belong to me, then touching you means war, and no one wants that. The intensity in his eyes made my breath catch. I don't belong to you, I whispered. Something flickered across his face. Not anger, something deeper. Not yet, he said quietly. Later that afternoon, Isabella appeared. She swept into the office like she owned it, all confidence and elegance, and immediately pulled me into a hug that I wasn't prepared for. I'm so glad you're here, she said warmly, stepping back to look me over. You have no idea how long I've been waiting for Dante to find someone. I blinked. We're not. Oh, don't be modest. She waved a hand dismissively. I saw the way he looked at you yesterday. My brother doesn't look at anyone like that. I glanced at Dante, who was watching this exchange with what might have been amusement. Isabella, he said mildly, you're making her uncomfortable. Good, she replied with a grin. She should get used to it. We're a lot. She turned back to me, her expression softening. But seriously, Mia, I'm happy you seem real, and God knows Dante needs someone real in his life. I didn't know what to say to that. So I just nodded. Isabella stayed for another 20 minutes, chattering about wedding plans, before Dante finally ushered her out with a pointed look. When the door closed behind her, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. She's intense, I managed. She's family, Dante said simply. Then he added, quieter. And she likes you. That matters. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something in his expression that I couldn't quite name. Why does it matter? I asked. He held my gaze for a long moment. Because, he said finally, this only works if they believe it. And despite everything, despite the fear, the confusion, the impossibility of it all, I felt something shift inside me, because part of me was starting to wonder if I wanted them to believe it too. 3 days later, I stood in a boutique I couldn't afford, surrounded by dresses I'd never have reason to wear, while Dante sat on a leather sofa and watched me with the patience of a man who had nothing but time. This is ridiculous, I muttered, clutching the silk fabric of the 5th dress the stylist had insisted I try on. I don't need all this. You do, Dante said calmly. There's a gala tomorrow night. You'll be with me. I turned to face him, the dress swishing around my legs. A gala. Yes, and I have to go. Yes, and I have to go. Yes, I crossed my arms. What if I say no? His mouth curved ever so slightly. Then I'll carry you there myself. I stared at him, trying to determine if he was joking. He wasn't. The stylist returned with another dress, this one deep emerald green, with a neckline that made my cheeks flush just looking at it. Dante's gaze flicked to it, then back to me, and something in his expression shifted. Try that one, he said quietly. It wasn't a request. 20 minutes later, I stood in front of the mirror, barely recognizing myself. The dress fit perfectly. Too perfectly. It hugged my waist, flowed over my hips, and made me look like someone who belonged in Dante's world. Someone elegant. Someone dangerous. I stepped out of the dressing room, and the moment Dante's eyes landed on me, everything went still. He didn't speak. He just looked at me, his gaze moving slowly from my face down to the hem of the dress and back up again. And in that silence, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Seen. That one, he said finally, his voice rough. The stylist beamed. Excellent choice, Mr. Calvetti. I swallowed hard, trying to ignore the way my heart was racing. It's a lot. It's perfect, Dante said. And the way he said it firm, final, possessive made me believe him. That evening, he drove me home himself. I'd expected one of his men to do it, but when we left the boutique, Dante simply opened the passenger door of his black car and waited for me to get in. I didn't argue. The drive was quiet at first. The city lights blurred past the window, and I tried to steady my breathing, tried to make sense of the strange intimacy of sitting beside him in the dark. You didn't have to do this, I said eventually. The dress, the gala, all of it. Yes, I did. Because of appearances? Because of you. I looked at him sharply. His profile was illuminated by the streetlights, all sharp angles and shadows. What does that mean? I asked. He was quiet for a moment, his hands steady on the wheel. It means, he said slowly, that if you're going to stand beside me, you need to look like you belong there. Not because you don't already, he added, glancing at me briefly, but because the people we're dealing with respect power, and power comes in many forms, including expensive dresses. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Instead, I just leaned my head back against the seat and closed my eyes. This is insane, I whispered. I know. I don't know how to do this. You will. His certainty was almost infuriating, but beneath it, I heard something else. Something protective. When we reached my apartment, he parked, but didn't move to let me out. Instead, he turned to face me fully, his dark eyes serious. There's something you need to understand, he said quietly. Tomorrow night, people will be watching. They'll be looking for weaknesses, for cracks, and some of them will try to test you. My stomach tightened. Test me how? Questions, looks, small cruelties designed to see if you break. His jaw tightened. But you won't be alone. I'll be with you. And if anyone crosses a line, I'll handle it. The way he said it calm. Absolute sent a shiver down my spine. You'd do that? I asked. For me? He reached out, and for a moment I thought he was going to touch my face. Instead, his hand settled gently over mine, his thumb brushing across my knuckles. Yes, he said simply, and in that moment I believed him. But later that night, alone in my apartment, I couldn't stop thinking about the way he'd looked at me in that dress, the way his voice had changed when he said, because of you. I didn't know what this was anymore. Protection? Performance? Something else entirely. All I knew was that I was standing at the edge of something vast and dangerous, and Dante Calvetti was the only thing keeping me from falling. Or maybe he was the one pulling me in. She didn't know. She had no idea what she looked like standing in that dress, all nervous elegance and barely contained fear. She had no idea that every man in that boutique had looked at her twice, or that it had taken everything in him not to break the hand of the one who'd let his gaze linger too long. She thought this was about appearances, about protection. And it was, but it was also about the fact that the moment his sister had asked that question, is she just her employee? He'd realized the truth. Mia had stopped being just his assistant months ago. Maybe longer. He'd noticed the way she frowned when she was concentrating, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was nervous, the way she never backed down from him, even when she should have, and now she was his. Not because he'd claimed her in front of his family, but because he'd already decided, long before that day, that no one else would ever touch her. He just hadn't told her yet, but he would. Soon. The gala was everything I feared it would be. Crystal chandeliers. A sea of tailored suits and gowns that cost more than my rent. waiters gliding through the crowd with trays of champagne, and everywhere the weight of scrutiny. I felt it the moment we arrived. Dante's hand rested lightly on my lower back as we entered, a touch that looked casual but felt like a brand. People turned. Conversations paused. And then the whispers began. "That's her, Dante Calvetti's fiancée. Where did she come from?" I wanted to disappear. But Dante's presence beside me was unyielding, a wall of calm power that refused to let me falter. "Breathe," he murmured, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "You're doing fine?" I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. The first test came 20 minutes in. A woman approached us, older, elegant, with sharp eyes that reminded me of a hawk. She greeted Dante warmly in Italian before turning her attention to me. "And this must be the famous Mia," she said in accented English, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "How? Unexpected." I forced myself to smile. "It's nice to meet you." "Of course." Her gaze swept over me, assessing. "Tell me, how did you and Dante meet?" He's always been so private about his personal life. It was a trap. I could feel it, but before I could answer, Dante's hand tightened slightly on my back, and he spoke. "We met through work," he said smoothly, and I realized very quickly that she was someone I couldn't let go. The way he said it, casual but absolute, made the woman's smile falter. She murmured something polite and excused herself. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "Thank you," I whispered. Dante's gaze flicked down to me. "I told you, I'll handle it." The second test came an hour later. A man tall, broad-shouldered, with a scar running along his jaw approached us while Dante was speaking to a business associate. He looked at me like I was something he could take. "You must be the new addition," he said, his voice smooth but predatory. Dante's always had good taste. I stiffened. "I'm sorry, I don't think we've met. Marco De Luca." He extended a hand, old friend of the family. I shook his hand briefly, but his grip lingered, his thumb brushing over my knuckles in a way that made my skin crawl. "Interesting choice," he continued, his eyes gleaming. "I didn't think Dante was the marrying type. Unless, of course, there's another reason for the sudden announcement." My cheeks burned. I tried to pull my hand back, but he held on. "Let go," I said quietly. "Why? We're just talking." "She asked you to let go." Dante's voice was calm, too calm. Marco turned, his smile widening. "Dante, I was just getting to know your lovely let go." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Marco's smile faltered and he released my hand. "Of course, my apologies." Dante didn't respond. He simply stepped between us, his body a wall of controlled fury, and Marco wisely retreated. I was shaking. Dante turned to me, his expression softening slightly. "Are you all right?" I nodded, though I wasn't sure if that was true. "Come with me," he said quietly, and I followed him without question. He led me through a side door and into a quiet hallway, away from the noise and the watching eyes. The moment we were alone, he turned to face me. "Did he hurt you?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. "No, I'm fine. Mia." He stepped closer, his hand lifting to gently cup my chin, tilting my face up so I had no choice but to meet his eyes. "Did he hurt you?" "No," I whispered. He wouldn't let go." Dante's jaw tightened. "He won't touch you again." "It's fine." You stopped him. "It's not fine." His thumb brushed along my jaw, a touch so careful it made my chest ache. "And he won't get the chance to try again." I believed him. God help me. I believed every word. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Why do you care so much?" He looked at me for a long moment, something unreadable flickering in his dark eyes. "Because you're mine to protect," he said quietly, "and I don't let what's mine get hurt." The possessiveness in his voice should have scared me. Instead, it made me feel safe. We stayed in that hallway for another few minutes, just breathing, just existing in the quiet. And then Dante did something I didn't expect. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black box. "What is that?" I asked. "Open it." I took the box with trembling hands and lifted the lid. Inside was a ring. Not just any ring, a diamond, simple and elegant, set in platinum. Beautiful. Terrifying. "Dante, people will expect it," he said quietly, "and I need them to believe this is real." I stared at the ring, my heart pounding. "Is it?" I whispered. "Real?" He didn't answer. Instead, he took the ring from the box and reached for my left hand. His touch was gentle, reverent, as he slid the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly. "It is now," he said. And when I looked up at him, I saw something in his eyes that I couldn't name, something that felt like promise and danger and inevitability all at once. When we returned to the Gala, the ring glinted on my finger, and the whispers started again, but this time I didn't feel afraid. Because Dante's hand was on my back, steady and sure, and for the first time since this all began, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't alone anymore. The morning after the gala, I woke to find 3 missed calls from Dante and a text message that made my stomach drop. "Dante, don't leave your apartment. I'm sending someone." I stared at the screen, my heart racing. What happened? Before I could respond, there was a knock at my door. I peered through the peephole to find a man in a dark suit, one of Dante's security team, standing in the hallway. "Miss Brennan?" he said when I opened the door. "Mr. Calvetti asked me to escort you." "Escort me where?" "To his residence." I blinked. "His what?" "It's not safe for you to stay here." 20 minutes later, I was in the back of a black SUV, speeding through the city toward the estate I'd been to only once before. My mind raced with questions, but the driver remained silent, and I didn't know who else to ask. When we arrived, Dante was waiting at the door. He looked like he hadn't slept. His shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, his sleeves rolled up, and there was a tension in his jaw that made my chest tighten. "What's going on?" I demanded as soon as I was out of the car. "Why did you pull me out of my apartment?" "Come inside," he said. "I'll explain." "Dante, inside, Mia." The edge in his voice left no room for argument. He led me to a private study on the second floor, a room lined with books and dark wood, with tall windows overlooking the estate grounds. The moment the door closed behind us, I turned on him. "Tell me what's happening," I said, my voice shaking. "Right now." Dante exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. "Marco De Luca." My blood went cold. "What about him?" "He's been asking questions. About you. About us." Dante's eyes were hard. "And last night, after we left the gala, someone tried to follow you home." My knees nearly gave out. "What?" "My men intercepted them before they got close. But it's clear that Marco's testing me, seeing if you're really under my protection or just a convenient cover story." I sank into the nearest chair, my hands trembling. "So what does that mean?" "It means you're not safe at your apartment anymore." Dante crouched in front of me, his gaze level with mine. "It means you stay here, with me, until this is resolved." I stared at him. "You want me to move in with you?" "I want you alive," he said flatly. "This is the only way I can guarantee that." I wanted to argue. I wanted to say that this was too much, too fast, too invasive, but the fear in my chest was louder than my pride. "For how long?" I whispered. "As long as it takes." I closed my eyes, trying to steady my breathing. "I don't have a choice, do I?" "You always have a choice, Mia." His voice softened. "But I'm asking you to trust me." When I opened my eyes, he was still there, close enough that I could see the exhaustion in his face, the tension in his shoulders. This wasn't easy for him either. "Okay," I said quietly. "Okay." Something in his expression eased. "Thank you." By that afternoon, my things had been moved from my apartment to a guest room in the east wing of the estate. It was beautiful, far more luxurious than anywhere I'd ever lived, but it felt surreal, like I was living someone else's life. Isabella stopped by that evening, breezing into my room with a bottle of wine and an easy smile. "So," she said, plopping down on the bed, "you're officially living here now." "Temporarily," I corrected. She waved a hand. "Semantics. The point is, you're here. And I'm glad." She paused, studying me. "How are you holding up?" I didn't know how to answer that. "I'm managing." "Dante's intense," she said sympathetically. "I know he can be overwhelming, but he's doing this because he cares. You know that, right? He's doing this because I'm in danger." "Because you're important to him," she corrected gently. "There's a difference." I looked away, my chest tightening. "I don't know what I am to him." "Then ask him." I shook my head. "I don't think I'm ready for that answer." Isabella smiled sadly. "Maybe not, but eventually you will be." That night, I couldn't sleep. I wandered the estate, trying to orient myself, and eventually found my way to the library. It was quiet, dimly lit, and filled with the comforting smell of old books. And Dante was there. He stood by the window, a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring out at the dark grounds. He didn't turn when I entered, but I knew he'd heard me. "Can't sleep?" he asked quietly. "No." I hesitated, then stepped closer. "You? Not really." We stood in silence for a moment, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on us. "I'm sorry," he said finally. I looked at him, surprised. "For what?" "For dragging you into this, for putting you in danger." His jaw tightened. "You didn't ask for any of this." "No," I agreed softly, "but I chose to stay." He turned to look at me then, something raw and unguarded in his eyes. "Why?" I didn't have a good answer. Or maybe I did, and I just wasn't ready to admit it yet. "Because I trust you," I said instead. It was the truth. Somehow, against all logic, I did. Dante's gaze held mine, and for a moment I thought he might say something that would change everything, but he didn't. He just nodded slowly and turned back to the window. "Get some rest, Mia," he said quietly. "Tomorrow's going to be difficult." I wanted to ask why. I wanted to stay, but instead I just whispered goodnight and left him standing there, alone in the dark. She trusted him. She stood in his library, exhausted and afraid, and said she trusted him. It was more than he deserved, more than he'd earned. But God, it was everything. He brought her here to keep her safe. That's what he told himself. That's what he told his men. But the truth was darker, more selfish. He brought her here because the thought of her being anywhere he couldn't reach made him feel like he was losing his mind. She didn't belong in his world. She was soft where he was hard, hopeful where he was cynical. She should have run the moment he told his family she was his, but she hadn't, and now she was here, in his home, under his protection, and he didn't know how he was ever going to let her go. He didn't know if he wanted to. 4 days passed. 4 days of living in Dante's world, of meals shared in quiet dining rooms, of passing him in hallways and feeling the weight of everything unspoken between us. He was careful with me, almost too careful. He kept his distance, never touching me unless absolutely necessary, never lingering too long in any room we shared. It should have been a relief. Instead, it felt like torture. On the 5th night, I found him in his office. The door was ajar, and I could see him sitting at his desk, his head bowed over paperwork, the lamp casting harsh shadows across his face. He looked tired, more than tired, worn down in a way I'd never seen before. I knocked softly. He looked up, and something in his expression shifted when he saw me. "Mia, it's late." "I know." I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. "I wanted to talk to you." He set down his pen and leaned back in his chair, studying me. About this. I gestured between us. "About what's happening. About what this is." His jaw tightened. "Mia? No." I cut him off, my voice stronger than I felt. You've been avoiding this conversation for days, but I need to know. What happens when this is over? When Marco backs off and I'm not in danger anymore? Do I just go back to my life? Do we pretend none of this happened? He didn't answer right away. And in that silence, I felt something crack. You want me to pretend? He asked quietly. I don't know what I want, I admitted, my voice breaking. I don't even know what's real anymore. You put this ring on my finger and told your family I'm yours. And I don't know if you meant it or if it's just part of the plan. Dante stood slowly, rounding the desk until he was standing in front of me. He was close, too close, and I could see the tension in every line of his body. You think this is just part of the plan? He asked, his voice low and rough. I don't know. Then let me make it clear. He reached out, his fingers brushing against my left hand where the ring still sat. This isn't a prop, Mia. It's not for show. And when I told Isabella you were going to be family, I meant it. My breath caught. Dante, I should have told you sooner, he continued, his voice tight with restraint. I should have been honest, but the truth is, I didn't know how to say it, how to tell you that somewhere along the way keeping you safe stopped being about duty and started being about something else entirely. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might break. What are you saying? His hand moved to cup my face, his thumb brushing along my cheekbone. The touch was achingly gentle. I'm saying that I don't want you to leave when this is over, he said quietly. I'm saying that the thought of you going back to your apartment, to your old life, makes me feel like I'm losing something I can't afford to lose. I stared at him, tears burning at the corners of my eyes. You barely know me. I know enough. His voice was fierce now. I know you're stronger than you think. I know you're brave enough to stand in a room full of people who could destroy you and not flinch. I know you look at me like I'm more than just the things I've done, and I know that I've never wanted anything the way I want you. The words hung between us, raw and undeniable. This is insane, I whispered. I know. You're a dangerous man. I know that too. And I should walk away. Probably. I closed my eyes, feeling tears slip down my cheeks. Why can't I? His other hand came up to frame my face, and when I opened my eyes, he was looking at me like I was the only thing in the world that mattered. Because you feel it too, he said softly. Don't you? And God help me, I did. I felt it in the way my heart raced when he was near, in the way his touch made me feel safe and terrified all at once, in the way I couldn't stop thinking about him, even when I knew I should. Yes, I breathed. Something in his expression broke open. Then stay, he said. Not because you have to, not because it's safe, but because you want to. I looked up at him, at this man who had turned my life upside down, and I made a choice. Okay, I whispered. Okay? And then, slowly, carefully, he leaned down and pressed his forehead against mine. We stayed like that, breathing the same air, existing in the fragile space between what we were and what we could be. And for the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. It happened 3 nights later. Not in a rush. Not in a moment of reckless passion. It happened slowly, inevitably, like something we'd both been holding back finally breaking free. I'd spent the day with Isabella, who had insisted on taking me shopping for what she called proper estate attire, which apparently meant clothes I'd never have the courage to wear on my own. By the time we returned, I was exhausted but smiling, something I hadn't done much of lately. Dante was waiting in the entry hall when we arrived. Did she behave? He asked Isabella, though his eyes were on me. Barely, Isabella replied with a grin. She kissed my cheek and disappeared upstairs, leaving us alone. Dante stepped closer, his gaze moving over me like he was checking for injuries. You look happy. I am, I admitted. Your sister's persistent, but kind. She likes you. His voice was soft. They all do. Even the ones who think I'm not good enough for you? His jaw tightened. Anyone who thinks that is a fool. The intensity in his voice made my chest ache. I looked away, suddenly unable to hold his gaze. Mia, he said quietly. Look at me. I did. You're not just good enough, he said. You're everything. The words broke something open inside me. Dante, come with me. He held out his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, I took it. He led me upstairs, past my room, past his office, to a part of the estate I hadn't been to before. When he opened the door, I realized we were in his bedroom. It was understated but elegant dark wood furniture. Tall windows overlooking the grounds, a massive bed that dominated the space. It felt private, intimate. Why did you bring me here? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Dante closed the door behind us and turned to face me. Because I'm tired of pretending. My heart stuttered. Pretending what? That I don't want you here. That I don't think about you every moment of every day. That I don't lie awake at night wondering what it would feel like to have you next to me. I couldn't breathe. I told you that you always have a choice, he continued, stepping closer. And you do. You can walk out of this room right now, and I won't stop you. But if you stay, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. I should have left. I should have been smart, cautious, careful, but I didn't move. I'm scared, I admitted, my voice trembling. Of me, of this, of how much I feel when I'm with you. Something in his expression softened. I'm scared too. You? I almost laughed. You're not scared of anything. I'm scared of losing you. His voice was raw. I'm scared that one day you'll realize what kind of man I am, what kind of world I live in, and you'll leave, and I don't know if I'll survive that. Tears slipped down my cheeks. Dante, he reached out, his hands framing my face, his thumbs brushing away the tears. Tell me to stop, he whispered. Tell me you don't want this, and I will. I'll let you go. I'll keep you safe from a distance. But if you stay, if you let me, I won't hold back anymore. I looked up at him, at the man who had become my entire world without me even realizing it, and I made my choice. I don't want you to hold back, I whispered, and then his mouth was on mine. The kiss was nothing like I'd imagined. It wasn't rushed or desperate. It was slow, deliberate, like he was savoring every second. His hands stayed on my face, holding me gently, as though I were something precious. I melted into him, my hands clutching at his shirt, and he made a low sound in the back of his throat that sent heat racing through me. When he finally pulled back, we were both breathing hard. Mia, he said, his voice rough, if we do this, if we cross this line, there's no going back. I don't want to go back, I whispered. His eyes searched mine, looking for hesitation, for doubt, but I didn't have any. Not anymore. He undressed me slowly, reverently, his hands steady even as mine trembled. Every touch was careful, gentle, as though he were afraid I might break. Are you sure? He asked, his voice low as his fingers brushed along my collarbone. I nodded, unable to speak. Say it, he murmured. I need to hear you say it. I'm sure, I whispered. I want this. I want you. And then there were no more words. Later, much later, I lay in his arms, my head resting on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Mia, he said quietly, his fingers tracing slow patterns on my back. I meant what I said. You're not just mine to protect anymore. I tilted my head to look up at him. Then what am I? He looked at me with an intensity that stole my breath. Mine, he said simply, in every way that matters. And for the first time since this all began, I didn't feel afraid. I felt home. The peace didn't last. 2 days after I'd given myself to Dante, after I'd woken in his arms and felt something shift irrevocably between us, the violence found us. It started with a phone call. I was in the library, curled up with a book I wasn't really reading, when Dante appeared in the doorway. His face was carved from stone, and I knew immediately that something was wrong. What happened? I asked, setting the book aside. Marco made his move. Dante's voice was tight. There was an attack on one of our shipments. 3 of my men are dead. My blood went cold. Dead? He's forcing my hand. Dante's jaw clenched. He wants a meeting. Tonight. Then don't go, I said quickly, standing. It's obviously a trap. It doesn't matter. If I don't go, he'll see it as weakness, and weakness gets people killed. I crossed the room to him, my heart pounding. Then take more men. I am. He reached out, cupping my face. But I need you to stay here. Promise me you'll stay inside, no matter what happens. Dante. Promise me, Mia. The fear in his eyes was so raw, so unfamiliar, that I nodded. I promise. He kissed me then, hard and desperate, like he was trying to memorize the feel of me. And then he was gone. The hours that followed were agony. I paced the library, then the sitting room, then the hallway outside Dante's office. Isabella found me there and sat with me, though neither of us spoke much. We just waited. And waited. When the call finally came, it wasn't from Dante. It was from one of his men. Miss Brennan, the voice said, tight and urgent. There's been a situation. We need you to stay calm. My heart stopped. Where's Dante? He's alive. But there was a confrontation. Marco had more men than we anticipated. Mr. Calvetti was injured. The world tilted. How badly? I demanded. He's stable, but he's asking for you. They brought him home an hour later. I was waiting at the door when the SUV pulled up, and the moment I saw him, blood on his shirt, a cut above his eyebrow, his face pale but determined, I nearly collapsed. I'm fine, he said immediately, though he was leaning on one of his men for support. You're bleeding, I said, my voice shaking. It's not as bad as it looks. But when they helped him inside and into a chair, I saw the wound on his side, a deep gash that had been hastily bandaged. I felt bile rise in my throat. Get the doctor, I snapped at the nearest guard. And then I was on my knees in front of Dante, my hands hovering over him, afraid to touch. What happened? Marco brought a knife to a negotiation, Dante said, his voice strained but steady. We handled it. Handled it. I looked at the blood seeping through the bandage. You're hurt. I've had worse. That's not comforting. His hand lifted, brushing against my cheek. Hey, look at me. I did, tears streaming down my face. I'm okay, he said gently. I'm here, and Marco's not going to be a problem anymore. I didn't ask what that meant. I wasn't sure I wanted to know. The doctor came and stitched him up while I held his hand, refusing to leave. When it was done, when everyone else had left, I finally let myself break. You could have died, I whispered, my head resting against his uninjured shoulder, but I didn't. You could have. Mia. He tilted my face up, forcing me to meet his eyes. This is my world. This is what it looks like. And I know it's brutal and ugly and terrifying, but I need you to understand something. What? I will always come back to you. His voice was fierce. No matter what happens, no matter how dangerous it gets, I will always come back. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. But I also knew that some things were beyond even his control. I can't lose you, I whispered. You won't. You don't know that. Yes, he said quietly. I do. And then he kissed me, gentle and sure, and I let myself believe him. Just for that moment, I let myself believe. The days that followed were strange. Dante healed slowly, refusing to rest as much as the doctor ordered, and I found myself stepping into a role I hadn't expected, caring for him. Making sure he ate, checking his bandages, sitting with him in the evenings when the pain kept him awake. And somewhere in those quiet moments, I realized something. I wasn't staying because I had to anymore. I was staying because I wanted to. It was Isabella who finally asked the question I'd been avoiding. We were in the garden, surrounded by late autumn flowers, when she turned to me with a thoughtful expression. Are you happy? She asked. I blinked. What? Here, with Dante, with all of this. She gestured vaguely at the estate. Are you happy? I didn't answer right away. I don't know, I admitted finally. Sometimes I feel like I'm living someone else's life, like I'm pretending to be someone I'm not. And other times, I thought about waking up in Dante's arms, about the way he looked at me like I was the only thing in the world that mattered, about the strange, fragile sense of belonging I felt when I was with him. Other times, I said softly, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Isabella smiled. Then that's your answer. It's not that simple. Why not? Because his world, it's dangerous. People died because of me, because Marco saw me as a weakness. And Dante protected you, Isabella countered. That's what he does. That's who he is. But at what cost? She was quiet for a moment. Then she said gently, Love always has a cost, Mia. The question is whether it's worth it. That night, I found Dante in his study. He looked up when I entered, setting aside the papers he'd been reviewing. You should be asleep. So should you. His mouth curved slightly. Touché. I crossed the room and sat in the chair across from him. For a moment, we just looked at each other. I need to ask you something, I said finally. Anything. Do you regret it? Claiming me in front of your family, bringing me into this. His expression grew serious. No, not even a little? Mia. He leaned forward, his gaze intent. The only thing I regret is that I didn't do it sooner. My throat tightened. People died because of me. People died because of Marco, he corrected firmly. Not you. Never you. But, no. He stood and rounded the desk, crouching in front of me so we were eye level. You are not responsible for the choices of violent men. You didn't ask for this. You didn't cause this. And I will not let you carry that guilt. Tears slipped down my cheeks. I don't know how to live like this. Then let me teach you. His hands covered mine. Let me show you that this life, our life, can be more than just danger and fear. Let me prove to you that you're safe with me. I already know I'm safe with you, I whispered. Then what are you afraid of? The truth slipped out before I could stop it. That one day you'll realize I'm not strong enough for this. That I'm just a girl who got caught up in something she doesn't understand. And all what? His voice was soft but insistent. Leave you, forget you. Mia, look at me. I did. You are the strongest person I know, he said. You survived a world that tried to break you long before I came into your life. You stood beside me in rooms full of people who wanted to destroy you and didn't flinch. You chose to stay even when you had every reason to run. That's not weakness. That's courage. Dante, I love you. The words stopped me cold. What? I love you, he repeated, his voice steady. I have for a while now, and I know this is fast, and I know this is complicated, but I need you to know. Whatever happens, whatever comes next, you need to know that I love you. I stared at him, my heart hammering against my ribs. Say something, he said quietly, a hint of vulnerability creeping into his voice. I swallowed hard, tears streaming freely now. I love you too. His expression broke open into something so raw, so relieved that it took my breath away. And then he was kissing me, and I was kissing him back, and everything else fell away. 3 months later, the threat from Marco De Luca ended the night Dante walked out of that meeting. I never asked for details. I didn't need to. All I knew was that Marco was no longer a problem, and the whispers that had followed me through the Calvetti estate had finally quieted. But the danger didn't disappear completely. It never would. That was the reality of loving a man like Dante. There would always be rivals, always be threats, always be shadows lurking at the edges of our life together. But there would also be this. I stood in front of the mirror in what had become our bedroom, adjusting the soft cream dress I'd chosen for today. It wasn't a wedding dress, not yet. That would come later, in a ceremony planned by Isabella and half the Calvetti family. Today was something smaller, more intimate, a legal binding, a promise made official. Dante appeared in the doorway, dressed in a dark suit that made him look every bit the powerful man he was. But when he looked at me, His expression softened into something achingly tender. "You look beautiful," he said quietly. "You always say that. Because it's always true." I turned to face him fully, my heart swelling. "Are you ready for this?" He crossed the room and took my hands in his. "I've been ready since the moment I met you." "Liar," I said, smiling. "You barely noticed me for the first 6 months." "I noticed." His thumb brushed over my knuckles. "I just didn't know what to do about it." "And now?" "Now," he said, leaning down to press his forehead against mine. "I'm making you mine. Legally. Permanently. Irrevocably." "I already am," I whispered. "Then this is just a formality." But it wasn't. Not really. It was a choice. A declaration. A promise that no matter what came next, we would face it together. The ceremony was small, just immediate family and a few close friends. Isabella cried through the entire thing, and even Dante's normally stoic uncle looked suspiciously misty-eyed. And when Dante slid a second ring onto my finger, a wedding band to match the engagement ring I'd worn for months, I felt something settle deep in my chest. This was real. This was forever. Later that night, as we stood on the balcony of our bedroom overlooking the estate grounds, Dante wrapped his arms around me from behind and rested his chin on my shoulder. "No regrets?" he murmured. "None." I leaned back into him. "You?" "Not one." We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, just breathing, just being. "There's something I need to tell you," Dante said eventually. I tensed slightly. "What?" "There's been talk about expanding into new territory. It's going to draw attention." I turned in his arms to face him. Dangerous attention? Possibly. I should have been afraid. A few months ago I would have been. But now I just looked at him steadily. "Then we'll deal with it," I said, "together." Something in his expression shifted: pride, love, relief, all mixed together. "Together," he echoed. I'd come into this world afraid and uncertain, a girl who didn't belong, but I wasn't that girl anymore. I was Dante Calvetti's wife. I was part of a family that would kill to protect me. I was loved fiercely, completely, by a man who saw me as more than I'd ever seen myself. And yes, there would be danger. There would be threats and violence and moments when I'd question everything, but there would also be mornings waking up in his arms. Quiet evenings in the library. Laughter with Isabella. Moments of peace carved out of chaos. This life wasn't perfect, it wasn't safe, but it was mine, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. Later, as we lay tangled together in the darkness, Dante's hand resting protectively over my waist, he pressed a kiss to my temple. "I love you," he murmured. "I love you too," I whispered back. And as I drifted off to sleep, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever came next, we would face it together. Always.